Chapter 14. Oh my gosh, I feel like you've been gone forever. Melody very nearly attacked Kaitlyn as she walked in the office door the next morning. I know, I almost forgot what this place looked like. Kaitlyn set her laptop bag down on her desk. Do we have anything pressing to do today? No, just working on some designs. Why? Because I have so much to tell you. This sounds like it might need donuts and coffee. Kaitlyn shook her head and groaned. No more sweets. Margie is a great baker, and I had to put on stretchy pants this morning. Ha! Okay, how about some popcorn? Sure, get some popcorn. I'll check my email and then tell you everything. Dillon, you don't have to stay for this, his mother said, as the last applicant left. He was helping her interview for the next groundskeeper, but his mind was a million miles away. Or, more specifically, 100 miles away in Denver. He hadn't been able to stop thinking about Kaitlyn after he said goodbye to her and Jack yesterday afternoon.
No, it's fine, Mother. I want to help.
I know you do, but what you should be doing is buying a ring and proposing to that girl. His mother shuffled the papers and tapped them against the table to even them out.
A ring? Mom, we've only been back together for a few days. I think it might be too early to propose.
Though he couldn't deny the thought had been in his head as well. You should have proposed to that girl 10 years ago. Remember what Dan said? There's no reason to waste any more time.
Dan, that was a topic that had to be addressed before he could focus completely on Kaitlyn. Are you going to start seeing him?
His mother tilted her head as she regarded him. Is it okay with you if I do?
I don't have a reason to say no, and I'd never want to deny you happiness. But it is a little odd. I mean, he was always Dad's friend.
He was, but before that he was my friend. He lives close and he's willing to come check on me. At least you wouldn't have to worry so much about your old mother.
Mom, I said I was coming back to help.
I know you did, and you can. But maybe you're needed more in Denver right now. It's only 90 minutes away. You could come back any time. Dillon mulled the information over in his head. He wanted to be there for his mother, but it was no secret his mind and his heart were with Kaitlyn. And he was nearing 30. He wanted a family and kids of his own.
Are you sure, Mom? Kaitlyn and I could do long distance for a few months until you feel comfortable with the new hire.
I'm sure. Now go and get that woman.
Dillon didn't argue any longer. He kissed his mother on the cheek and headed to his room to pack his things. He'd have to get back to Florida soon to take care of the rest of his items, but he could look for an apartment to rent in Denver until then. Oh my goodness, so this guy went to school with the two of you? Melody had listened with rapt attention to the entire story. Her popcorn was gone as she'd shoveled it in almost mindlessly throughout the story. Yeah, we think he was trying to take over Dillon's life. Dan is supposed to keep me informed if there are any new developments in the case. I never like to see someone go to jail, but I have to admit I'm kind of glad he's gone. He seemed so nice at first, but then he grew creepier and creepier, always appearing out of nowhere like he'd been following and listening. Melody shook her head. Wow, and to think I was going to try and get his number. I'd say you dodged a bullet there. I guess so. So, are you and Dillon together now? Kaitlyn's lips pulled into a smile. We are, but he's staying at the lodge to help his mother, so we'll only be able to see each other on weekends.
That's probably okay, though, at least for a few weeks. We have a lot of work to catch up on.
Dillon pulled into the parking lot of the jewelry store and took a deep breath. Had he really been doing this same thing a few weeks ago? It felt so different this time. There wasn't the squeezing on his heart or the difficulty breathing. This time, only the hope he would find the right ring existed. The jewelry store was brightly lit as he pulled open the door. Glass cases lined the walls, and 2 salesmen in dress shirts and ties stood behind them.
"Welcome to Miner's Jewels. How can we help you?"
The older gentleman with graying hair and kind eyes smiled at him. Dillon crossed the space between them.
"I'm looking for an engagement ring."
The man smiled.
"Those are always my favorite words. Come with me."
He walked to the right to the largest case in the room. Dillon followed. This was where his indecision had happened last time. But as he looked over the rings in this case, clarity fell on him. He knew Kaitlyn wouldn't like oval diamonds, so those were out. She went more for the princess cut or the round diamonds. As far as size, he knew she would want at least half a carat, but no more than a full carat.
"May I see that one, please?"
He pointed to a beautiful princess-cut ring that sat in the middle of the case. The diamond sat in between 2 bands, a gold one with small baguettes circled from above the stone and to the left. It angled down to the right, making up the side of the ring. At the bottom, it morphed into a silver band that then came up the left side of the ring. It snaked under the diamond and also held baguettes. The diamond seemed to float in the middle of the 2 colored bands. It was perfect, beautiful and original, just like Kaitlyn.
"That is a beautiful choice,"
the man said, as Dillon examined the ring closer.
"It has both gold and silver for the woman who wears both."
Dillon's hand grew warm as he held the ring, and he knew this was probably the one. Still, he scanned the case one more time. He wanted to be absolutely sure. But none of the other rings called to him as this one had.
"I'll take this one. I need a size 7.
"This must be your lucky day," the salesman said with a smile.
"That ring is already a size 7.
Dillon didn't believe in luck, but he did believe in God. The easiest path wasn't always the right one, but Dillon had learned that when it opened up and everything went right, it probably was a good choice.
"Then wrap it up for me."
With the ring tucked in his pocket, Dillon returned to his truck and began the long drive to Denver. "Hey, Dad, I'm so glad you could make it," Kaitlyn said, as she opened the door for her father. He lived about an hour away, but she had called him earlier to let him know she and Jack were back in town, and he had insisted on driving out to do their Christmas celebration.
"I'm glad you're back in town. I was beginning to wonder if I'd ever get to give my grandson his gifts."
He held a few packages in each arm. Kaitlyn swatted his arm as she pulled him inside and shut the door behind him. "We weren't gone that long, Dad."
"Long enough for your tree to start wilting."
He walked to the large pine tree and placed the packages underneath it. It was true that it had lost many of its needles, but the lights still shone and the ornaments still hung. Though the room wasn't as Christmassy as she had decorated the lodge, Kaitlyn felt the room still held its Christmas cheer. "Okay, so the tree lost a little water. It has to be recycled soon anyway."
"That is true. I'm still glad to have you back."
He crossed back to her and pulled her in for a hug.
"Now, where is my grandson?"
"Probably in his room, playing on his tablet. Blessing and a curse, that thing."
Kaitlyn had resisted buying him a tablet because she didn't like the effect technology had on people. Adults everywhere were more focused on their phones than each other, and she was seeing it filter down into children too. However, she'd caved due to this recent trip. Knowing she would need time to work, she'd gotten him one before they left for Keystone, to make sure he had a way to keep himself entertained.
"Well, go tell him it's time for presents. I'll just get myself some coffee."
Kaitlyn smiled and shook her head at her father. As long as she could remember, the man drank a pot of coffee a day, half in the morning before work and half in the evening after work. It was a wonder the man ever slept. Jack was indeed on his bed playing his tablet when she pushed open the door.
"Look, Mom, it's Thomas. I can race him."
Apps were another thing she hated. The first download was free, but Jack could only do so much before he needed to buy the additional items. Kaitlyn had already erased a few of those games that he had bugged her to spend money on.
"That's wonderful, honey. Think you could put it down for now? Grandpa is here and wants to open Christmas presents with us." "Yes, presents. I've been waiting all day to open them."
He tossed his tablet on his bed and hurried past her out of the room. All day was a slight exaggeration, but he had asked to open them last night when they returned home, this morning before she dropped him off at the nanny's, and this afternoon as soon as she picked him up.
"Well, there he is,"
her father said, scooping Jack up as he ran into the room.
"I was wondering if I was going to have to return your gift."
"No way. I don't care what it is, Grandpa. I want it."
Her father laughed as he sat Jack down.
"I thought you might. Can you read enough to hand each person their gift?"
Jack puffed out his chest.
"I can read my name and Mommy's. I might not know how to read yours, but you would just get the gifts with the names I can't read."
Her father chuckled again.
"That does seem like pretty sound logic. Well, why don't you go get us each one to start with?"
As Jack hurried to the tree, Kaitlyn sat next to her father. A moment later, Jack shoved a package in her hand.
"That says you, right?"
Kaitlyn glanced at the tag and smiled at her son.
"Yes, it does. Good job."
She held the gift on her lap until her father and Jack each had a gift as well. Then they all opened their gift. Kaitlyn received a beautiful sweater, her father a new tie, and Jack a toy shop. Then Jack hurried back to the tree to get more gifts. Kaitlyn wished the opening of presents took a little longer, but with only 3 of them, it was a speedy process. One day, she hoped to have a much larger family gathering so they could enjoy the process longer. When the last gift was opened and the thank yous said, she began picking up the paper and bows to throw away. She had just wadded it all into a ball when the doorbell rang. Who in the world would be ringing her bell at 8 p.m. at night? Even though she knew he was in jail, her first thought, or rather fear, was that Barry had somehow escaped the police, followed her home, and was now prowling around her house. She shook her head to clear the image and opened the front door. Though not her worst fear, it was still not an image she had expected to see.
"Dillon, what are you doing here?"
"I'm moving here,"
he said with a smile. Kaitlyn tilted her head. Had she missed something? She thought he understood she wouldn't live with him unless they were married.
"Dillon,
He laughed.
"No, not in here. Here to Denver. I realized I didn't want to be an hour and a half away from you. And with my mom and Dan getting together, she assured me she had someone to look out for her. So I packed up my things, drove up here, found an apartment, and started the paperwork. I'll have to stay at a hotel for a few days, but I'm okay with that if it means I get to be close to you and Jack."
As if summoned, Jack appeared behind Kaitlyn.
"Hey, Dillon,
Want to come see all the toys I got?"
Dillon smiled down at him.
"I do, though I was hoping I would make it in time to participate."
Jack wrinkled his brow.
"I don't see any presents. Are they in your truck?"
"No, I just brought one present, but it's for both you and your mom. Oh, hey, Frank, good to see you,"
he said, noticing her father on the couch. Her father stood and extended his hand.
"Dillon, nice to see you as well."
"So you're really moving to Denver?" Kaitlyn asked. Her head was still spinning from the news.
"Yes, I'll have to fly back to Florida in the next week to take care of things on that end, but I'm ready to start my life here."
He was really moving to be close to her? She had hoped he would someday because her business was here, and she didn't want to pack up and start over, especially not now that business was growing. Melody had landed 2 new jobs, and Kaitlyn still had all the rooms at the lodge to finish. So, though she was overjoyed, she hadn't expected it to happen so soon.
"You're going to be close by?"
Jack asked.
"Does that mean we can't go to the lodge anymore?"
Kaitlyn laughed. "Don't worry, buddy. You'll get lots more time at the lodge."
"After you finish redecorating the rooms, do you think you could do something outside?"
Dillon asked, turning his attention to her. "I don't know. I don't usually do outside jobs. That might be more Melody's strength. Why?"
"Well, it's such a lovely place and large enough that I was thinking it would be a good spot for an outdoor wedding. Maybe if we added a gazebo."
Kaitlyn blinked. A gazebo? Had he hit his head? She didn't construct gazebos, though she supposed her team could build one. "I suppose, but that really isn't what I do."
"Oh, well, I was rather hoping our wedding could be the first one there."
He pulled a box out of his pocket and dropped to one knee. Was he proposing? Was she ready for marriage?
"Kaitlyn Grace Bell, will you marry me and do me the honor of becoming my wife?"
He popped open the lid to the box, displaying a beautiful diamond ring.
"Does that mean you're going to be my new dad?"
Jack asked as he stared at the ring.
"If your mother will have me."
Jack's eyes were focused on hers.
"Please, Mom, Dillon would be a great dad."
"I know my opinion doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things," her father said, "but I happen to agree with Jack. I've been waiting a long time to see you married, and I think your mother would agree you two belong together."
Her mother. Kaitlyn wished her mother were still here so she could be in on this moment. But she knew her mother was watching from heaven. The proposal felt fast, and yet she had imagined and wished for this moment for over a decade. Somewhere she probably still had a notebook with the words, "Mrs. Kaitlyn Fields," scribbled inside it. And she didn't feel scared. When she had agreed to marry Jerry, she'd been plagued with doubts, and her throat had dried up at the thought. But she'd been too scared to say no. She felt none of that now. Kaitlyn felt nothing but pure joy. "Yes," she said, as tears flooded her eyes. "Yes, I will marry you." Dillon slid the ring onto her finger. Then he picked her up and twirled her around.
"Thank you for making me the happiest man in the world," he whispered into her ear.
As he lowered her to the ground and she wrapped her arms around his neck, she wasn't sure which of them was happier.